Yeah, so hi, I'm Chris Garty. I'm a senior product manager on the Power Automate team, specifically on the Cloud Flows team, and my team specifically deals with administration and lifecycle. So the lifecycle part of that mandate is Application Lifecycle Management, or ALM. I'm going to give you a little bit of a Cloud Flows perspective on that today. Great. So let's talk about Power Platform ALM. So I'll run through ALM. I'll run through kind of Power Platform ALM, and then I'll talk about some ALM related improvements. And then I'll just open it up for questions afterwards. Jocelyn mentioned that you're a fairly chatty bunch, so yeah, let's have some Q&A at the end as well. So Power Platform ALM, what is ALM? So it's the lifecycle management of applications, includes governance, deployment, and maintenance. We aim to drive efficiency through predictable and repeatable software delivery. Um, the tools facilitate collaboration between teams and departments. It can be as simple as a maker building an app or a flow and then just asking an administrator to deploy it to production. So within the Power Platform, ALM spans multiple teams. It's a very, you'll hear about ALM and about ALM things from multiple teams. So my Power Automate team is just one of the teams that's building maker experiences for Power Platform products and contributing to this ecosystem, but there's a number of other teams. There's a team within Power Apps that's dedicated to application lifecycle management. There's a team that creates the solutions UI within the Dataverse team. They manage the solutions model and kind of experience as well. Yeah, so there's multiple teams that deal with ALM within the Power Platform. So the basic view of ALM is moving a maker, creating something, making changes to something, and then moving it from a development environment through to test, testing it, moving it back to development as needed, and then eventually moving it through to production once the testing passes. So environments and environment strategy are a really important part of ALM. Within the Power Platform, environments are a space to kind of store and manage and share your organization's data, apps, and business processes. So they form containers within the Power Platform. So within each environment, you should also be aware that you only have one Dataverse database. So you need to kind of deal with refreshing the data, loading the data, managing the data as well. So solutions are another important part of ALM. Solutions are used to transport apps and components from one environment to the next. They can be used to apply customizations to existing apps. They include metadata and entities with configuration data, components as well, but they don't contain business data. Yeah, so they're used for moving things around between environments. We also talk about source control. So source control is an important topic, one that is facilitated today using Power Platform build tools. So with build tools and source control, you can automate ALM. Source control is where you're going to have your single source of truth, all of the resources that you're creating inside of your environments. You want to get those into source control and then be able to move those to the appropriate environment from source control. Yeah, a shared source control can support team development by facilitating code reviews of changes as they're going into different environments, allow you some form of governance as things are moving between environments as well. So there are some build tools that are available for the Power Platform. They can be used to automate common build and deployment tasks. They create a pipeline that allows you to generate build artifacts, move things to downstream environments, provision and deprovision environments, perform static analysis checks using the solution checker. and automation is a key goal of what you're trying to do with application lifecycle management to improve the productivity, the reliability, the quality, and the efficiency of what you're doing. Try and take the human element out of it somewhat. You can use the tools to validate, export, pack, and unpack, and get the solutions into the environments that you want for testing, and then get them into production once they're ready to go. So there's a number of other considerations related to ALM, but I wanted to give you that kind of just general overview of the topic space. You can certainly go out and look at our documentation. We've got a whole Learn site dedicated to ALM with a ton of documentation, and that will in turn point you to specific documentation about Power Automate aspects and Power Apps aspects and things such as this. But the other things to be aware of related to kind of applications and application lifecycle management and moving solutions and your automations in terms of flows around between environments are licensing considerations. So you're going to need to be aware of which licenses things are running under. You're going to want to be aware of governance and administration of the things that you move in between environments. Security is an important concept, using permissions and security to make sure that the things that are in environments are only accessed by the people that you want. And then there's an emerging capability around analytics. So in the last year, we made available a tenant-wide analytics and reports for Power Platform resources. So those are certainly a useful tool to be aware of. So what are some ALM related improvements that we've been working on recently? So the first dimension is something that we're referring to as pipelines. So today, Maker and Pro developer deployments are kind of disjointed. So for makers, you have an experience inside of the Maker portal that's simple. It allows you to export solutions, import solutions. The maker can set up their connections. They can deal with putting values into environment variables, but you need to have to be able to move something into test and production environments. You need to have maker permissions in those environments, and that's not something that we recommend, and it's not something that administrators at large customers are willing to provide. There's also no backup, versioning, audit history, or governance controls related to the kind of simple abilities to export and import solutions. So it's kind of an incomplete picture for makers. And then for pro developers, you can have frequent automated deployments with enterprise level governance, and it's really powerful, leveraging the Power Platform build tools to facilitate that. But dealing with connections and deployment settings is difficult. There is a deployment settings file that you can leverage to pass deployment settings across. Connections kind of need to be created in the environment before you do the deployment, and then you can use deployment settings to kind of point at those connections and make use of them. But it's not maker friendly. So what we've recently made available is pipelines, Power Platform pipelines. There was a blog post about this in December. There is documentation available at that ALM Learn site that I referenced previously, specifically for pipelines. And you can do a Bing search or a Google search for Power Platform pipelines to learn more. It's currently in public preview, and it's going to GA in June. It's largely so if I can summarize it, administrators will set up a pipeline. It's very easy to set up a pipeline. There's currently a modeled app that you'll use to set up the pipeline. That experience will change over time, and kind of come into the maker and admin portals. And then makers, citizen developers, they can initiate deployments. So inside of the solutions experience, inside of the solution explorer, when you click into a solution, on the left side, in addition to being able to see your objects and your history, you'll have a pipelines tab. And that pipelines tab will give you access to the pipelines that your administrators have defined. And then you'll be able to move that solution into along the stages in the pipeline. As you're moving it into the stages in the pipeline, that maker will then be able to set up connections as needed for the solutions to leverage. So it's a way for a maker to kind of self-deploy and kind of self-help themselves and cut down on the burden on administrators and center of excellence teams to move things between environments. Developers, pro devs can also run those pipelines via CLI. And in the near future, there'll be capabilities coming out that allow you to create extensions to those pipelines, such as running flows immediately before or after something is deployed to set things up or send notifications. It's really going to be a great advancement. Yeah. So some ALM improvements that I've had a fairly close hand in delivering in the cloud flow space. So over the last year, we've been doing a lot of ALM improvements related to cloud flows. I've listed off a number of them here and kind of listed off the months that those became available. A few key ones to mention. We made it so that solution flows now show up in the My Flows experience. So the My Flows experience previously would have only shown non-solution flows. Now solution flows, where the definitions is stored in Dataverse, those will show up in the My Flows experience. And when you click into one of those flows, you'll get a solutions card that will show you any of the solutions that flow is contained within. In the future, we'll improve that solutions card to make it so that you can move flows between solutions and kind of change which solutions the flows are in. But this is a great start. We've also started making available the ability to have service principal application users own and run flows. So that's the information that's kind of shown below the fold. This capability is available in preview right now. It was meant to go public in January. I noticed that I still have January in the right column on this. It's going to become public in February. We're still working on some license enforcement pieces related to this. Once those are complete, then we'll have a blog post and documentation and kind of more information about the service principal support. But I know a large number of customers have asked for the service principal support, so I wanted to at least mention it here, that this is something that's kind of coming out in the next few weeks. Something else that's coming out really soon is the concept of flows and Dataverse by default. So last year, kind of at the end of last year, the Power Apps team made available a switch which allows environments to be opted into creating new Canvas apps in Dataverse solutions by default. So this means that when the maker is in there in Power Apps and they're in that kind of default apps experience and they go to create an app, if Dataverse is available in that environment, then that app will be created in Dataverse in a Dataverse solution and just added into Dataverse by default. We have a preview of this available now, a private preview of this available now for Cloud Flows. We are in the process of kind of finishing up that work. Yeah, and it'll be available shortly, and we'll have a blog post related to this. So this will allow the first kind of milestone for this will facilitate blank flows and flows created from template to be added into Dataverse by default when Dataverse is available. So this is something that should be a great advancement for ALM and kind of governance capabilities. Because flows need to be inside of solutions to be able to move between environments. So having those flows automatically created in Dataverse, defined in a Dataverse solution so that you can quickly just move that into the solution of your choice or reference that from the solution of your choice certainly speeds up the ALM process. And then in the near future, in kind of March and April, we'll be adding support for all of the integration entry points, such as Teams and SharePoint, so that if Dataverse is in those environments, it will also create those flows inside of Dataverse by default. Additionally, we are just starting work on something that has been asked about a lot. It was the second most requested idea on the Power Automate Ideas site last year, and that is support for two things. I'll talk about the first, and that's being able to have draft and draft flows, being able to create draft flows and publish them, and being able to change flows and have them in a draft mode, and be able to save changes to a flow even if there are errors. Yeah, so we're actively working on this support right now. The support is being added into Dataverse using the component state capability. So we're excited to be working on this with the Dataverse team. The draft version of a flow will just always be turned off, and the published version of the flow, that will be the one that end users see. And when you're ready to publish the draft flow,
I shall mute.
okay, sounds good. Yeah, when you're ready to publish that draft flow, then you just you'll be able to hit the publish button, and then users will start seeing that flow. That flow will be the one that will start running on a schedule, however that flow runs. Related to this, we're also going to be adding flow versioning, so versioning for cloud flows. So makers will be able to change and publish. So maker, yeah, maker changes and publish operations will be visible in a version history pane. Makers will be able to look at those previous versions to see what changed, restore to a previous version, and see which versions were published along the way. We also it probably won't come out immediately, but shortly afterwards, you'll be able to add like version notes similar to what you see in Power Apps today. So all of this versioning capability is being implemented via solution components. So this will be available for solution cloud flows, and cloud flows is the first place that this versioning support, this Dataverse versioning support, is being added, and then you'll see other solution components moving to this versioning support over time. All of the version information will be stored in Dataverse, and then the Dataverse team is also planning to do source control integration with Dataverse in the future as well. So that'll be something fun to look forward to, and definitely a help in terms of ALM capabilities, where things would just show up in source control automatically. Something else that's just in the early stages, we've just started talking about it, and we have a private preview of the developer tools related to it, is the Power Platform catalog. So this is something that we're working on, an organization-wide catalog of Power Platform components. This will enable pro developers and makers to easily share Power Platform artifacts with their colleagues to help solve business problems. And then we'll provide capabilities for administrators to be able to configure approvals and kind of decide which things they allow into the Power Platform catalog. Yeah, as I mentioned, the private preview of the pro developer tools are underway now. We've got a limited set of folks that are taking advantage of that, having a look at that and giving us feedback about it. And we'll open that up publicly here in the next month or so. So that's something really exciting related to ALM, and really allows makers to, we talked about pipelines enabling makers to kind of self-service themselves in terms of pushing things to different environments. The Power Platform catalog will allow makers to kind of self-service, facilitate getting things into environments via a pull mechanism. So it should be really exciting to see that. And that is me. So now, as I mentioned, I can just open it up for questions. I'll have a look at the chat. I wasn't looking at the chat as we were going along.
There were two
Um,
questions from
yeah.
Phil in the chat. The first one had to do with which solution do they get added to by default? I don't remember which slide that was referring to, but Phil, feel free to unmute and just ask directly if you'd like.
I think it was which when solutions are added, flows are added to a solution because they're now in Dataverse by default.
Yeah.
If Dataverse is available, is it default
Yes.
environment or some other solution?
Right, so it's
Default
just
solution.
that default solution. Yes, yeah. So for those that don't know, there's a default solution that isn't really a solution. It's really just a view of all of the components, solution components that have been added into Dataverse in some solution. We're adding it into that solution, just the default solution. So you'll be able to find those solution components and then add them into your solution of choice. If there's a caveat there. If you can always go into a solution and define it directly in that solution. And then the other thing is, if you have a solution context and then you go and start creating just in the MyFlows experience, start creating some flows and apps, those will drop into that solution context. So we will leverage the solution context when it is available.
That sounds cool.
Yeah.
Also to add, I think there's two default solutions, isn't there? There's the default solution that's everything, and then there's a common data services default solution, which has nothing in it from what I can see. I believe it's that second solution, isn't it? The common data services default
That's
solution.
We were originally planning to do that. I must say I need to double check on that detail. I haven't seen that behavior happening recently. So yeah, I think we might have changed our minds on that. So
Yeah.
the common data services default solution is one that's heavily leveraged with the Teams integration. So yeah, I need to double check on that. Sorry.
Yeah, I read it somewhere, but I haven't tested it. So
yeah, it's good to see people looking forward to draft flows.
Yeah. Phil also had a question about, are different versions of the flows still stored in the workflow table?
Yes, so the Dataverse team is still working out exactly how the version information will be stored, but yes, likely it'll just be in the workflow table. Yeah, I don't have specifics on that. Like, it's literally in development right now. But yes, the version information will be available in Dataverse. If it's not directly in that workflow table, it'd be in a linked table. So you'd be able to
Yes.
grab that information.
Chandra asked a question about, are any updates on supporting service principal for more connectors? It is a conversation we are having. It is definitely somewhere in our roadmap and something I've actually spoken about just this week. With regards to distinct timeline or date, I'm not sure, but yes.
Yes. Yeah, so service principal support, right. Yeah, on Jocelyn's team, they are looking at adding service principal support for more connectors. It's a one at a time thing. It's not something that we can add all connectors, add service principal support for all connectors
That is
at
actually
once.
a common conversation for a lot of things that have to do with connector enhancement. For certain things where, it's enabled for a few connectors, it may have originally been coded so that it was individually enabled for each of those very few connectors. So for us to go back and then fix them on a 940 connector basis is a lift. So we're trying to figure out how.
Right.
I just want to make sure we leave time for Sean as well. But who has their hand raised? And then, let's go with Michael.
Hi, thanks very much. My question's similar to the one that's just posted in the chat. Appreciate the overview, Chris. It looked really exciting for the new ALM pipelines. Will that be replacing the ALM Accelerator app? And specifically, some of our teams that are using the GitHub Actions and the Azure Pipeline Actions, are they being retired in favor of this, or will they still be maintained?
So the build tools that you mentioned at the end there, those will still stick around. You can still create pipelines as needed. You'll be able to extend the solution pipelines that get created with build tools There's some interplay there, some extensibility that the team is still working on. Will pipelines replace the ALM Accelerator app? Not in the near term. I don't have a super clear answer for this. So the ALM Accelerator app is something that's available, for those that don't know, is something that's available via the COE starter kit, and it can facilitate deployments, and makers can run it to request deployments. So in much the same way that you can with pipelines. They're very similar capabilities. There's still some capabilities that are available via the ALM Accelerator that aren't in the pipelines, in the solution pipeline space. I guess the question would be, if you were starting today, would you be able to use the Power Platform pipelines, solution pipelines, instead of the ALM Accelerator app? I think you could today. Yeah, so we'll see how that develops.
Awesome. And I think we will take 2 more questions and then leave the last 15-ish minutes for Sean. So the last 2 questions is the one from Jason, Chris, in the chat about since we are allowed to move flows, and then after that, Phil's last question about docs.
Yeah, this is so the question is, since we're allowed to move flows between environments easily, when will SharePoint catch up and be able to run flows from outside the default environment from a button on a list? There's talk about there's active discussions going on related to this. So there's discussions about SharePoint being able to kind of point at different environments. Yes, being able to point at a different environment. There's a kind of a sub question there of like, well, what about multiple environments? There have been discussions about that as well, being able to see flows in multiple environments and be able to run those in the context of a SharePoint site. There aren't any firm decisions on this right now. Yeah, it's a topic that I catch up on like once every couple of months, and it seems like it's been progressing slowly over the last year or so.
And then the last question was about, are there any docs on the preview feature of using SP to own flows?
Yeah, no, there isn't right now. Yeah, we're still waiting on that governance support before doing the blog post and publishing the documentation related to the service principal ownership of flows. So you heard it here first.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris, for all of these updates and explanations. I actually put a question in the chat that was like, use me as a like button if we want Chris to come back and talk about admin stuff, because you and I were discussing that yesterday.
Yeah.
And you got some likes, so maybe we shall bring you back, because I know there are a good quantity of makers here, but apparently there are also some admin personas as well in this audience. So perhaps we shall see Chris again.
Nice. That'd be great.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll watch the chat. If anyone has other questions, feel free to ask in the chat.
Great.